Howdy y'all, old Buster coming to you again. Got another old story. Name of this one is You Skeered. Well, I know I've told you boys and girls and all you folks out there about these stories about being true, or mostly true, and some of it just me, I made up my own mind, based on some things we knew that people tell us. But I just want you to know, if you ever want all the stories, they got pictures and everything that I did some research on, and it's really a good thing. It's not only educational, it's places you've never been, you get to see some of that stuff. You just write Buster and the Boys at yahoo.com. Now you know it ain't no A-N-D and T-H-E, it's Buster A-N-T-H-A. Buster and the Boys at yahoo.com. Just want to remind you of that. And you can still go to old Larry Simpson over there at his radio station at KZIS, and all the stories there archived, and you can listen to them on the radio too. But anyhow, we go to this new story here called You Skeered. Buster was at the house one evening and old Herbert Coleman come on by. Herbert was right good size, you know, and he was kin to Wyatt Earp, except he didn't carry no guns. Anyhow, Herbert worked over at the Wilson funeral parlor and wanted to know if Buster wanted to make a few dollars of helping him for a bit. 'Twarn't no heavy work, just a riding with him up in the hills to bury a feller. His partner couldn't get a loose, he had something else to do and needed some help. And with dollars being short and all, Buster said, well, why not? Well, Buster did clean up right nice, and he put on his and Sunday go-to-meeting suit and jumped into that shiny new Cadillac Harvey was driving. They done drove for about 3 hours and come to a little church in the backwoods, and the folks there had been a-gathering for a spell, I reckon, 'cause they was a-milling all over the place, and Herbert said they was early at that. Well, when I said Harvey over there, his name is Herbert Harvey, so sometimes we call him Herbie, and sometimes Herbert, and sometimes Harvey, but anyway, same feller. Anyway, Buster helped Herbert lift the casket and get it on in the church house, along with the help of a few of the men standing around about smoking some PA. Well, you know, that's that old Prince Albert tobacco out the can. They rolled it up and had him a dadgum cigarette right there. Or put it in pipe, it's pipe tobacco too. When they done got in there, the singing commenced along with the shouting and praising the Lord. Women was a-squalling, and Buster got a little teary-eyed himself. About that time, the preacher come on up and started his sermon and telling a little story or two about the life of the Dade feller. Well, then that preacher done reached in a box and took out a 6-foot rattler. Old Buster's eyes bugged out and said, what in the world? Well, that wasn't even the half of it. He done wrapped it round about his neck and arm and started a-prancing and a-hollering. Danged if a bunch of other fellers and women folk didn't come up and grab all sorts of pies and critters out of that there box too. They'd never seen the like. They say some of them folks even drank lye, but Buster didn't see that, so he couldn't swear to it, but he sure enough seen them jumping around with them snakes. Copperheads and rattlers was in that there box. But I tell you one thing, Buster didn't see no cottonmouths. You know, they is plumb frightful and aggressive like, so I reckon they had some sense not to fool with them. Whew. Well, after all that carrying on, they got the heck on out of there. Boy, howdy, 'twarn't enough fast enough for Buster, I tell you. Never seen the likes of that with them being snake handlers and all. Heck, they even wanted Buster to join in the church. Run like a scalded dog, he did. He wasn't even going to stick around there. Well, Herbert drove Buster back on towards town and said he had a stop to make. He drove to a little funeral parlor on the way to Little Rock, a little place called Booger Holler outside of St. Joe, and picked up some Dade feller he had to take on back to England, pronounced with an A, of course. England. Well, after a bit, they loaded up the Dade feller and stopped for a snort in Little Rock at the 609 Club. Now, you talk about a sight for sore eyes. The early times in Coke did look real good after all Buster'd been through and seed that day. When old Herbert pulled up to the curb and parked, they was ready to get on out, but then something plumb frightful done happened. The body of that Dade feller twitched and sit straight up. Well, that's enough for Buster. He lit a shuck out of there and run past the feller at the door and told the bartender to give him a drink and be quick about it and leave the bottle. Well, Herbert come on in, sat down with Buster, and told him it weren't nothing to worry about, 'cause body's done that all the time, or at least sometime. Kind of like frying up frog legs in a skillet, jumping around and all. Well, Buster understood that now. Well, Herbert finally convinced Buster to get on back in the car and go back to angling. Well, he done that, and the ride back was only about 30 minutes and was uneventful with no more shenanigans from that Dade feller in the back. After they done got back to the funeral parlor, funeral parlor, Buster met up with an old school buddy, Lonnie Woodson. He was an undertaker now and took real bad to drink. Of course, Buster could figure out why. Reckon I would too if I had to work with smelly Dade folks every day like that. Well, Lonnie told Buster to come on in and sit for a spell till he was done. Then they would go out on the town, down to Ferdy that is, Glenn's place for a home brew or a beer, and sit around the pot-belly stove and eat some peanuts and throw the shells on the floor. It was kind of fun stomping them shells and hearing them crunch too. Well, Buster went on in and Lonnie told him to hold tight there for a minute till he got all the lights turned on. It was kind of creepy in there with all them caskets and such. There was some kind of curtains hanging down a wispy, gauzy, willably-like in a real dim light. Well, Buster eased on into the room there and kind of sidled up close to a wall and hollered out to Lonnie. 'Tweren't nary hiding her hair, Lonnie, and then the place went pitch dark. Well, something done jumped out from there in them curtains and grabbed a hold of Buster and started dragging him into a coffin. Whoo, Buster was fit to be tied, I tell you. He came all unglued. His eyes bugged out, and for a second there couldn't even move a muscle. Well, then the juices started a running, and with that spook of staring him in the face, Buster took off like a bat out of hell. He run over and threw everything in his path. Knocked over the coffins and tore plumb through them, out of them doorways and through the curtains that was hung up. But he didn't stop there. He went right on through the screen door, taking it plumb off the hinges. And he didn't stop till he was under the bank of angling clock at the corner by the police station. Made it in record time, too. Well, come to find out, old Lonnie was a-funning with Buster, but he didn't take it too kindly now. Lonnie went on round back to the freight elevator and come back down the back stairs. He snuck up on Buster and eased on behind them curtains and cabbaged on to Buster's leg and began to pulling him through the curtains into a coffin. Well, you know that was too much for Buster to take. Wasn't no Hank gonna get him, I tell you. He come a-loose, and when Lonnie showed up later, he wasn't a-laughing none. Buster done got Lonnie all tangled up in them curtains and pulled him through them coffins, across the floor, through the screen door. Now, old Lonnie was scun up from head to toe, hide and hair hanging off everywhere. Boy couldn't work for a week, he was so stove up. Well, Wilbur, the manager, come in the next morning before the flower shop opened up next door and spied the biggest mess he ever seen. Took him most part of 2 days to clean up and fix the door and send coffins back to the factory to get repaired, not to mention buying new curtains. Well, I don't reckon Lonnie or Herbert ever had to call to do that again, and it cost them dearly in more ways than one. They done found out Buster was like a bull turned loose in a china's closet when he was spooked. Didn't ever figure he was that stout. Just made Buster a bit more of a reputation is all. But Buster can tell lots of stories that he knows for sure about them spooks. But he don't like 'em. Good Lord done told him to stay plumb away from that kind of stuff like in the picture shows and shit. He has a truck with folks that do that too. Don't allow nothing of the likes of the devil in his house or anywhere around it. Buster has chores, but there's a pretty gal down at the hotel he wants to see and spark and spoon for a while. Her name is Bonnie Wahila Emmerdine Sullins Morgan. Ain't that a mouthful? She's an Indian gal, 6 foot tall and wants to be kissed. No time for foolishness now. But Buster seed that Crayson boy across the bayou come riding up to talk to her. That paint of his'n ain't no match for that gray Buster got off of Melvin and Ike Ollinger. Walter Dewayne done had his'n gray, and with Walter Dewayne being his friend and all, he just had to have one too. Took him 2 summers of baling hay to pay for him. Raised him from a colt, and he sure could run and wouldn't come to nobody but Buster. Well, Buster whistled, and old Stormy come a-running. would even untie his own reins to get to Buster. Well, Buster hightailed it over to the hotel and beat that Prairie County boy to the door where that gal was a-grinning like a possum eating green persimmons. Well, Buster hollered, "Better luck next time," and grabbed that gal and took off with her. Probably picked up a picnic lunch and rode on out to the lake and rode her around a bit and sang her a little tune. Guess I'll see the boys next Saturday at the picture show, and we'll have to talk all about it. I'll have a quarter since it was my birthday, and I'll spring for a Coke with Buster and nickel's worth of French fries to boot," said Jesse. "Danged if it ain't Saturday already." Well, Buster finished all his chores by dinner time. Had to butt all the levies in that back 90 before he could leave on out, his Grandpa Gus said. They had to take it to the couch meeting Friday evening with Grandma and him. Seemed like there was going to be a hard spring and things had to be done to keep body and soul together. He told Buster they was going to have to work out for extra cash and told the line to get by till next year. Well, no problem for Buster, whatever it took, he told his Grandpa and Grandma. Put a little damper on his and Saturday and sparking, but he could do with his and dime for the week. Miss Inez would still let him in the picture show if and he took up the tickets. Well, Buster got into town around about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, went over to Soup's pool hall. Some of the boys was drinking a little white lightning and started shooting some craps. Well, Buster wasn't much into gambling, but if he'd bet a nickel, he still had a nickel, plus Jesse was going to buy the Coke and fries, and he had his a nickel for the picture show later that evening. Well, Buster throwed down that nickel, and danged if he didn't win. Well, now, he done had himself a dime now. He took a nickel and shot a hard 8 at 8-to-1 odds. Won that in 2. Now, he had his and dime plus 40 cents. Made a side bet with a feller down from Seat and Dump at 10-to-1 on boxcars. He hit that in 2. Now Buster had $4. Buster decided that was enough for him and quit that crap game with his $4 winnings and went on inside of Soup's. Never been lucky in his life when it come to gambling, but today sure was his day. Now, Buster dearly loved to play cards. Any kind of cards was okay with him, and he was good at it too. Had a memory like an elephant. Some of the boys was a-playing dominoes in the back, so Buster side-fodled on back there just to watch for a spell. Pretty soon, one of the fellers got up to leave, and they asked Buster if he wanted to play. He said, "Well, sure enough I do." They was a-playing for 2 bits a point, and Buster made a deal with a buddy of his and Daddy, Red Crockett. Red would spot him if he lost more than that $4 he had, and Buster could work off his and debt either roofing or cutting trees in Red's business. Well, things got to moving along right nicely. He and Red was partners and won $127 apiece that afternoon. Boy, Buster was in hog heaven, I tell you. Never seed the likes of that kind of hard cash in his life. He was rich. About that time, some of the boys off the plantation at Plum Bayou come in and said there was a poker game at Gene Henderson's place on Old River and wanted Buster to come. Well, Buster went with them boys and followed on his and Gray Stormy whilst they drove their Model A flatbed. The game got right lively, and there were some fellers from back east in the game. Buster was a-doing right well, and all the other players left on out but 4. Buster was a-noticing something kind of fishy going on when the others left on out and he went to losing. Fact is, he lost all he had, his $127 and his and dime. Well, Buster mounted up and went on back to town. He went by the pawn shop that David Irwin owned and borrowed him some money. Buster wasn't no Jew, but old David liked Buster considerable and asked him if he wouldn't take them Yankees. Buster told David he reckoned he could, but he had to have a little help with their cheating and all. Well, Buster had to put up the grade to get the money, and he did. He sure knew he could beat them. Well, Buster went on by Skip Bates's house and knocked on his door. He told Skip them Yankees was a-cheating at Gene's place and needed his help to beat them at their own game. He done figured out what they was a-doing after ciphering on it for a spell. Well, Skip jumped in his pickup and told Buster to get on in. Well, David let Buster keep his and Gray even though he had his marker for him. Skip and Buster got back to Gene's place and the game was still a-going on. Bully Hendricks and Reggie Shannon was there too, and Reggie was drunker than a skunk and soused to the gills. Well, Bully done caught up a water moccasin and had him by the head and sticking that darn snake in Reggie's face and anybody else that was thereabouts. Didn't do it to Buster, though, because he knowed there would be a thrashing real quick. Finally, Bully and Reggie left out, and that left Buster and Skip and the two Yankees. Skip caught on real quick to their cheating ways, and then they began to win it. It was probably just before daylight that the last hand was played for all the marbles. All in for all four players. But really, it was just 2 against 2. Them Yankees just couldn't figure out how Buster and Skip got onto them, and they had meant to clean out them and a whole bunch of other boys. When it come to showing the hands, one of the Yankees had a full boat. But that didn't beat Skip's 4 aces. Buster and Skip raked in all the money and started out the door. Well, Skip hollered to Buster, "Look out!" and Buster turned, and one of the Yankees was about to stab Buster with a pig sticker. One quick uppercut took him out to play, and Skip hollered again to get on into the truck. About that time, the other Yankee feller come out on the front porch and was brandishing a pistol. Just about the time he was going to fire, he fell through the floorboards of that old porch. The boards was old and rotten with all the moisture from the river, and the boys were just plumb lucky that crooked Yankee fell through. The gun went off in the air, and Skip and Buster lit out of there with wheels a-spinning. The good Lord put a guardian angel to look after them that night, I tell you. Buster never did make it to the picture show that night to meet up with Jesse and went on by his house Sunday afternoon. He told Jesse the whole story, and that's why I can tell it now. He picked up his and Gray and paid off David his $1,000. Skip and Buster split the winnings at $35,000 apiece. Buster was rich. He took that money to his and Grandpa and Grandma and took care of all their debts and let Buster buy a 50-mile Oldsmobile that would run like greased lightning. Even took it to the drag strip once. Put up the rest in a savings to be used when they had to for emergencies, and Buster with enough money left in his pocket for a year. He picked up Jesse and the Milner gal he was a-sparking and got that pretty engine gal into the hotel and went to the drive-in in Little Rock in his a new car. Well, most of the time Buster rode his and Gray, and that bit of money didn't change him none. Skip was married up and used his money to start a business in an automobile repair shop. The two of them never gambled together again, and everybody's life just went on as usual. Of course, Buster and his friends all benefited from Buster's good fortune, but that gift horse was never looked at again in the mouth. No more gambling, Grandma said. She didn't say much, but when she did, you done what she said and no back-talk neither. Just wouldn't think to do that nohow. Life was back to normal, but you could bet your bottom dollar Buster was the talk of the town. The sheriff went after them Yankees and chased them all the way back east. I'm a-going by Buster's house to play some cribbage and eat supper with his folks, said Jesse. My folks are going to drop by for coffee and pie and listen to the radio with Buster's Grandma and Grandpa. Walter Dwayne will be on over on Friday afternoon with all of his brothers and them two pretty sisters of his, Mary Gale and Carla Mae, to butcher a hog and render some fat. Us boys, especially Buster, probably would have sparked them sisters of Walter Dwayne's, but we all knowed we'd be in a tussle for sure if we did. Fact is, we all been in many a scrap over them gals at the schoolhouse anyhow. Them hairy-legged ne'er-do-wells was about them all the time, and we run them off every chance we got. Old Walter Dwayne would scrap a circle saw too, and would get up in your face like a coon. Just ball up on your head, and you couldn't get him off of you. Better not mess with his sisters. Well, coming on dark, and Mama's a-calling for supper. Gotta go. P.S. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This is Jesse talking. Signing out. Have a blessed day.